All right, it's Reed's time. I'm Jason Tudor. It is time on Sprockets when we dance. The whole reason for the show, right? Of course. And so, of course, we have 3 comics that we are going to read this week, or that I have read, and that I'm going to tell you about straight out of my dollar box. And as announced earlier this week, they are Star Corps number 3. Marvel Fanfare number 52, and breathlessly waiting to read you Captain Canuck number 12. We will get to that in a bit. First, let's talk about Star Corps. Star Corps is a DC series. This one was published in, when was this one? 1994, so this was 90s comics. I wasn't really picking up comics back in the 90s. And so the team was Dan Vado, storytelling and dialogue, Norman Felschley, storytelling and pencils, I'm going to screw that name up, Mike Macklin was inks, Gene D'Angelo was colors, John Costanza was letters, and the editors are the editors. So this one was based in Seattle, and there was a science project that was going on, and this kid had volunteered himself, the one that's on the cover here, he was a science guinea pig for whatever program or college or whatever it was, and he talks about how he was guinea pigging, and he went on this journey, this process where they were trying to tap into his latent powers of ESP, and they sort of did that, and they gave him, in doing so, they had him tap into this latent computer conscious, and it gave him these different powers. And so throughout the story, you have these scientists who have called upon these androids when they're in the process of these experiments. They sort of come out of nowhere, and they have to evacuate this machine called Mind Game, and it's a total like 1994. Here, have a look if you're on the video. It's kind of a 1994 looking sort of version of what a living computer would look like. It's got these rounded sort of mosque-y looking domes and everything else, and so they go to shut it off, and then the lights go out, and the usual sort of cliche things start happening. These androids show up and start killing things, and eventually they have to rely on this kid who's been guinea pigging and his powers, and he has these sort of powers to melt the androids, and then he melts more androids, and he gets them out of there, and then he turns on the scientist who's been helping him, and he doesn't kill the guy, but then he sort of hurts the guy, and then he wants to show him what his life has been like, so he puts him through this sort of paranormal visions that he's having. And comic ends by the kid who's been guinea pigging showing the scientists, and then it sort of ends it with somebody coming up going, "What happened?" And nothing at all. And so the scientist who's been helping him gets sucked into this sort of scientific field at the end. His body gets descrambled. Sort of a la Tron, or what's another one where the body gets ripped apart, but his consciousness is like in Watchmen, like at the end of Watchmen when he gets ripped apart and then comes back as that. So this is definitely a dollar comic. I tried to get into it. It's got some really funky cliche lines. I'm trying to find the one that gets repeated over and over again. Let me see if I can find it. It's the one by the scientist. The kid is telling him what's happened and that he's got these powers. And he keeps telling the scientist, look, this happened to me. And he's being very detailed about it. But over and over again, the scientist just keeps saying, where is it? You're babbling. Like he says, you're babbling. He says, you've got to stop that. But he says it like 4 times. Even though the kid's been right the first 3 times, he gets a 4th time to go, you've got to stop this nonsense. Here it is. You're starting to babble, Mr. Barnes. I have to run some more tests when the power comes back on. Even though they're in like the throes of a massive scientific crisis, climate change, nobody believes, or something like that. But on a more localized scale, like climate change in a building. Nobody believes that climate change is happening in the building. It is. And so he keeps saying, you're babbling, Mr. Barnes. Blah, 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 blah. So, they go on and on with this, and there's some phone calls and androids, and Mr. Barnes ends up saving the day as the guy with the eyeball laser powers. Again, 94, number 3. I suppose I probably could have picked this up. Star, I believe, is the corporation. That's a Star Labs. Let me see. What does Star stand for? Star Labs, right. Let me see. Star. I thought they defined it, but there's another. My favorite panel is this panel. If you see it on video, is this of his. He has a nightmare of his mother coming at him with this spiked fly swatter, but that one piece she's got working coming toward him is fantastic. So there's your panel of the week for this issue anyway, and then the clown with the flamethrower. But it's an interesting concept. It's just there's some really hard cliched dialogue here that just doesn't work. So definitely a dollar bin comic, though some of the art is pretty good, and some of the art is very good, and I like some of the colors toward the back. I really like, if you're on the video again, this panel of when Mr. Barnes gets the scientist. Here he is. He's doing a Mr. Fantastic stretchy reimagining and trying to tell him what he's been going through. So it's pretty cool, but the story itself was kind of clunky and wrought with cliche. But they gave it a shot. That's why it's in the dollar bin. The second one that I found in the dollar bin this week, Marvel Fanfare 52, and it actually stars, and I remember when I bought it, one of my favorite characters, the Black Knight. And I remember the Black Knight because he had a sword that was made out of a chunk of a star, and I always thought that was pretty cool. So, but I always had a kind of a like for the British characters of the Marvel Universe. So you had like the Black Knight, you had Captain Excalibur, and you had all those British characters, and they've been featured more recently in a great annual. I can't remember the number, but I have that somewhere. I have to do that one week when we talk about different kinds of comics. But so this is a tale of Black Knight, and it's basically like a Crusades tale. And of course, the Black Knight at that time was Dane Whitman, and he is. There's a great opening too, by the way, by Al Milgrom. Where he's talking about how am I going to open this story, and it ends with a Snoopy panel that says he was a dark and stormy night, which is pretty good. I thought that was pretty funny. So that was a pretty good start. I really like the art in this issue. So the art in this one was Scott Hampton and Ernie Chan, and the art in this issue is great. The problem with the story is that and the artist, look at this panel. This is really a nice panel on page 3 of one of the Muslim soldiers going through something there, or Muslim rather. I think he's one of Saladin's handmaids or something like that. And then you have like the Black Knight on the horse here. Just some really beautiful artistic stuff happening. So needless to say, the Saladin character and the Dark Knight character get into a bit of a tete-a-tete, and they start fighting and through their crusades, and they end up with this sort of primitive tribe. And they are subjected to these kind of witchcraft rituals, and the Saladin character disappears, but the knight feels an obligation to go after him, so he dives into this witchcrafty ceremony through the smoke, and they encounter an alien. The knight cuts the alien, frees the Saladin guy, but can't free the woman who was the sacrifice from earlier. Again, on video, another brilliant-looking panel with this sort of idolatry, bull, pregnant-looking statue there. And then some really gorgeous pages in here. It's just that the story was pretty hokey. There's a line in here. Of course, Dane Whitman is, a dude, and he's not a Black Knight. But there's a great line in here. This is the best line of all 3 of the comics. Is he says, "The god of the hill, Moloch, if I remember my comparative mythology." I mean, he has time to, let me see, I've got this alien monster, it's about to kill this dude, let me think through my comparative, he verbally references comparative, but that's kind of the fun of Marvel, I guess. And here's where he dives, in a great, again, such well-drawn panels, dives through the magic ether or whatever it is to save the Saladin character, and then uses the Star Sword to cut up the beast, free his newfound friend in that, and end the adventure. They kind of part ways as I don't want to say friends, but as warriors. Fist bump, right? Chest bump, testosterone. Anyway, the art is beautiful. The story is clunky, but it's not. It's clunky in the sense that it's like they tried to do night, but they also tried to do not night, and it was kind of an in between. And then the second thing they try to do with this one, and I totally get it. By the way, this is August 1990. So what was that? It made me, 21. 21st birthday year. they try to do a lot. So this is during the Crusades. Red flag. And so you have Black Knight as a Christian, and then they have these Muslim warriors that they're fighting. But then there's some really hokey stuff. You know, they keep trying to sort of appease everyone throughout it, and say something like, let's see, where's the first time I noticed it? I guess it was here. The battle ends and the cross reigns over the acre, the stench of death everywhere. The Lord of this holy land, be he Allah or Jehovah, has taken follower and foe with hungry indifference and waits for the prayers that will follow the slaughter. And then Black Knight, I think this is the writer's homage, says, treat the survivors well regardless of their faith. Right. And no looting, he says that, and no looting. So needless to say, somebody starts to loot, and that's where the Saladin friend character, I can't remember his name, he's a Sarsian. And so there's more of that goes on, and it goes like, be you Christian, Muslim, and even they throw in or Jew. It's uncanny. But they're trying to walk this sort of fine line so as not to offend, and just make it sort of a Crusade-centered story or a Caliphite-centered story and sort of like that. So it's an interesting dichotomy, though. I do like how Black Knight and this Sarsian sort of get together and become friends at the end, but it's one of those manly friend things where they have to beat the shit out of something in order for them to become friends. So that's kind of how that happens, and that shows up in the book. Again, the art is brilliant. Now, the thing that really caught me on this one, the story was okay, but the art was brilliant. So this is definitely not a dollar comic, if only for the art. But I had to catch my breath because in the back there is a Doctor Strange feature called Mirror Mirror. And looky who the artist is for this bad boy. Where is it? There it is. Gene Cologne and Al Williamson. Al Williamson, Star Wars artist, supreme, brilliant artist in his own right. One of my favorites growing up. And Tom Orzechowski doing the letters, one of my favorite letterers ever. So there's this little featurette back here of Doctor Strange with beautiful Al Milgrom and Gene Cologne, especially this. Very Gene Cologne-ish, again for the video, very Gene Cologne-ish, Kirby-esque sort of psychedelic panel, which was so Doctor Strange anyway, that whole vibe. But it's a nice little featurette, and then there's a portfolio by Paul Ryan, including, again on video, this wonderful Silver Surfer Galactus pinup, which is great. Kind of stuff that gets you want to draw, makes you want to become a comic artist. That looks wonderful. This is not a dollar comic. This is definitely worth something more than $1. If for the art alone, again, the Black Knight art is beautiful. You get the Al Williamson stuff in the back. You get the Gene Cologne stuff in the back. This is good stuff. This is definitely worth more than $1. And now the time has come. I pulled a Captain Canuck from the dollar bin. I love Captain Canuck. Love it. And I don't know why. I have collected every issue of Captain Canuck I could find, old or new, and I love this comic. I love this comic, the series, and I'll talk about 12 in a second, but I love the series because it's so not Marvel Comics. It's not... So I think many of us grew up in an era when the superhero and the supervillain were very New York centered. Like you had to, Spider-Man had to swing from buildings, and Doctor Strange had to come out on Bleecker Street, and everything had to evolve in skyscrapers, and there was a lot of population, and things happened there, and you had a lot of opportunity to fight crime, and Batman had Gotham, and he could, wreak havoc on crime and Arkham Asylum and the whole thing. Very metropolitan, New York centered. Captain Canuck is not that. It was definitely so... I remember when I started reading it and how appealing it was just to see like, oh, he's sort of out in the middle of nowhere and, they're helping 3 or 4 people. And in this particular issue, he's trying to stave off an alien attack. And at one point gets sucked into this time vortex and people think he's dead. And he gets sucked back in time and he has to fight... or he's about to make friends with some natives of wherever he's been thrown back to, and he thinks he's going to have to. Well, he's going to enlist their help to do whatever he can, and then all of a sudden, some Vikings attack, and there's Captain Canuck, and he decides to take the side of the natives and have a punch up with the Vikings, and that's pretty awesome. And I love the way the costume's drawn, and I love this style of art, and I love every bit about this comic. This is independent comics at its finest. You get this great letters column. Fan art! They have fan art. I love that. And what else do they got in here? They've got a little featurette called Beyond, which is great. But then at the end of the book, they've got a fantastic subscription page. Look at that. That is, again, on video. Sorry, listeners, but look at that. I love that. They have souvenir page. They have buttons and stickers and pens. I wanted all of this, but I was too late to the party. This is, I think, 1976. Let's see. Where did he put the date in this thing? I can't find the date. I'm sorry. I thought I had it right in front of me, but I do not. I'm pretty sure it's 76 or 77. Anyway, I love Captain Canuck. I can't say it enough. I just think, you think of comics that are sort of, that have a Canadian bent to them, like Alpha Flight. Of course, Wolverine is a Canadian character, which started, which helped Alpha Flight get its legs. Here we go. Okay, so this is 80. This is December 1980. CKR Productions, Calgary, Alberta, Canada. Oil country and rodeo country. But I love this comic. There's the back of the book, and there's the front. Love this book, and it's just because it's not standard fare. You're actually kind of going, what's he going to fight? Like bears? Or like beavers, or the way that the author and the artist worked this, it can't turn out really great. So I love all of my issues of Captain Canuck, and I like the new issues of Captain Canuck. I'm just a big fan. So if you are the creator of Captain Canuck, I love your book, and thank you for producing it. And I've always been inspired by it. So if you get a chance, it's not a dollar comic, but you will find many of them in your dollar bins. And I recommend buying every single one of them because they're awesome. All right, that's all for the reads today. Again, if you like the reads, you can catch the video segment. It's on YouTube at Atomic Bazooka Studios. Just look for it there. And, of course, it's always in the podcast every week. It's about 15 minutes long, and we just read some dollar comics out of the dollar bin and try to see if they're worth $1 or they're worth more than $1 or maybe worth less than $1. Maybe like that earlier, the first one we had, the Star Corps, was not probably the most dollar bin-ish one that I've hit so far. And that's saying a lot because there's been some good quality so far. And I'm just, again, pulling stuff that I've bought for $1 out of many places. All right, when we come back, an interview with Mike Barron. Stick around.